Please join us in welcoming Mr. Daniel Assisi.
Good morning. Have you ever felt a weird presence, something you couldn't quite explain? Have you ever, all of a sudden, become a little bit more anxious than you were before? Or perhaps a little bit angrier than you were before? Or even happier for no apparent reason? Have you ever felt that maybe you should go this way opposed to that way? Have you ever felt that something was going to happen? Have you ever seen something move when it shouldn't? Or, if you haven't, do you know anyone that might? Well, today, you're in the right place. Most likely, had you answered yes out loud, which none of you did, in public, you may consider yourself a little weird. But fortunately, you were in good company. Because we are today talking about mediumship. And boy, am I glad for 15 minutes of break. Because I do not want to follow Divaldo. I also understand that I am the only thing between you and lunch. So I promise I will do my best to take you out of here quickly. But we are all mediums. It is a bold statement by a bald guy. But we are all mediums. And as we today here take some time over the next couple of hours and on Sunday to discuss a little bit about what is mediumship. A couple of thoughts always come to our minds, and let us be honest, we're all thinking it. And they probably are. Okay. What does it mean to me? What can I get out of it? How can I make the best use of it so I can have a better life, so I can be happier? If you are asking yourselves those questions, or if you did ask yourselves those questions, there's nothing wrong with it. That's who we are. And hopefully, today, we will talk a little bit about the basic foundations of mediumship, about what it is, how it affects us, and how we can make its best use. And if nothing else, I shall use my mediumship phenomena abilities to materialize a working clicker. And there he goes. That, my friends, it's physical phenomena. We'll talk about that later. But if anything else, there are three things that I want to bring to you today. This moment, sponsored by Cliff Notes. Number one, mediumship. It's everywhere and it is always present. Number two, mediumship has been revolutionized in its understanding. We are extremely fortunate to be here today. 150 years ago, actually 155 years ago, we would not known half as much as we know today about it. And that is in due part to this medium's book, Kardec's second publication. And the third message, and perhaps the most important message that I would like all of us to walk out of here with, is the fact that mediumship is one of the greatest proofs of God's love for us. So if we reach the end of our lecture today, or talk, and we've addressed two of the three, I get a passing grade. But anyways, for us to talk about mediumship, it's important for us to say that mediumship is not a boat of average size. Mediumship is, let's say, an ability to act as an intermediary between the two realms of life, the physical and the spiritual. Now, we all know this, right? You're probably here interested in this, but we figured we got to go back to the basis, to the definition, so we know where we're going from. But what the interesting thing may be here is that we're not often aware of is that this term was first coined by Allan Kardec. I have not, in my studies, found an earlier publication with the word mediumship in it. And the reason is simple. Kardec first used it to connote those who act as a medium, an intermediary between the physical world and the spiritual world that take place at the same time. Because it was first coined by Kardec, we're not going to find historical references to it. We're not going to be able to say, we're not going to be able to open, for instance, the Bible or the New Testament and find the word mediumship in it. We're not going to be able to pick up the Vedas and find the word mediumship in it. We're going to find different names. But nevertheless, the phenomena is there and it's not new to us. It's not new to Spiritism. It has always been there. But what I find really interesting about mediumship, it's almost impossible to detach mediumship from other things. What do I mean by that? I mean that if we look inside mediumship really deep, there are a couple of assumptions that come with it, that come to us. One is, if we are interested in mediumship, it's because we already accept that our spirit lives on after our body dies. Because if we are, after all, communicating with spirits, they've got to come from somewhere. So we at least accept the existence of spirits. And if we are in doubt as to whether spirits exist or not, mediumship can also serve as a proof that they do indeed exist. So regardless of what angle we take, whichever way we approach this, mediumship, the knowledge about mediumship can be transformative. Once we really dive deep into it and start looking at it, it ought to transform the way we look at the world. And when we change the way we see things, we change the way we live. We change the way we behave. And that's ultimately the goal. So, as we lay the foundation for mediumship, again, we understand that the word is not new, but the concept the word is new, but the concept is timeless. It's been there forever. In fact, one of the things that oftentimes folks will ask when faced with these kind of feelings, premonitions, intuitions, and phenomena we talked about is a sense of doubt and isolation. Am I the only one? Am I crazy? Is this happening to anybody else? We've seen the beautiful movie in the beginning, laying the foundation, and indulge me, to take us back a little bit in the timeline of things. This is but a small piece of our human timeline. One, because I'm incapable of knowing it all, and two, because one of my personal goals is to make sure that you don't sleep through this. So, different words have been used for the term mediumship. In the past, 5,000 years ago in Egypt, we had high priests and the Book of the Dead and the papyrus, which was a instruction on how to navigate the act of passing and what was required of folks once they pass to achieve the underworld. Well, you can only get that knowledge from those who have come before. So you have to communicate with them. So back in the day, way old school, the Egyptians already interfaced with the spiritual world as high priests. If we move forward into ancient Greece, again, we find the Oracle of Delphi, a group of women who lay over a fissure in the floor and with the vapors of sulfur went into trance and were able to prophesize and tell people things. Folks from the entire world, known world at the time, would come to ask the Oracle of Delphi about things. In fact, one of the things that was asked of the Oracle of Delphi was, who is the wisest man on earth? And the answer, as we probably all know from our middle school experiences, was Socrates. Which is interesting because Socrates himself, perhaps one of the wisest men ever to touch our soil here on this planet, was also open about seeing what he called daemons. Daemons at the time, before the word has changed, meant spirits. So often Socrates dialogued with daemons and entertained conversations with the spiritual world. And if he did, he was then a medium. But, like a betting commercial, if you call in the next 10 minutes, you also get some profits. We have, of course, the first original prophet of our Christian tradition, Moses. And if Moses went up a hill and came back with tablets of law, of divine law, which he got from God himself, we have here one of the first psychographic books. And he was so modern, he actually did it on a tablet. But all jokes aside, we see that going on, and it's a normal part of life. And in that time, when we heard the word prophet, we often meant those who had the ability to communicate and prophesize and get information that otherwise we would not have known. And so we have great miracles told us about the spirit communication. In fact, if you open the New Testament, it is one big book about mediumship. Here we have in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 5 a story about how Jesus heals the demon-possessed of Gadarenes. And the story goes, to make it quick, that Jesus comes out of the boat into the land of the Gadarenes and finds this obsessed man who had been put to shackles by the people in the city because he was hurting himself and hurting other people. And he would frequently break his shackles and run away. And when Jesus comes, Jesus then frees him from this spirit. And this spirit complains before he isn't even close to him, actually, and says, "Oh, Jesus Christ, what do you want with us?" Jesus then says, "Go away, leave." And before he does, he says, "What is your name?" And the old story, we all know this, "My name is Legion," and so forth. But the point here is, with a story that we're already familiar, is to identify that that man felt the influence of a spirit. In this case, a negative influence of a spirit. So he too was a medium. And again, we see this in the New Testament. Just to beat a dead horse, dead, we also have John, in the first letter of John, which is a fantastic, perhaps one of my favorite parts of the whole New Testament, where he gives some advice to all Christendom. And he says, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God. For because many false prophets are gone into the world." Practical advice for the practice of mediumship, which later on our friend Suzana is going to develop more in the mediumship with medium in the day. But we see here throughout the day the call to that, and we see also Paul saying in a famous passage that's recited all over and again, probably the most quoted part of the New Testament, "Though I speak with tongues of men and of angels, and yet I have no charity, I have no faith, I have no love, I am but becoming sound of a cymbal, a brass," and so forth. So again, the tongues of angels is the ability to prophesy, to talk with angels. Prophets, so far. We have other words, we have sibyls, we have shamans. Throughout our history, we've seen different cultures with the idea of healers and so forth. And we, of course, have to stop and pay homage to who I really wish were my cousin, Francis of Assisi. Perhaps the greatest medium of all time, who heard a voice calling Francesco to rebuild the church, recognizing it was from Christ. He managed to physically rebuild a broken church in Assisi, Italy. Later, he found out that his task was not a physical one of rebuilding something physical and tangible, but to rebuild the church in its purest meaning. He, throughout his beautiful passage here on earth, also constantly interchanging with the spiritual world. We, of course, have Joan of Arc as well, a young French peasant from the suburbs, from the outskirts of France, who was able, through her visions and her interactions with angels, to rally an arm and dressed as a man, prevent the United Kingdom from taking over France and saving our Parisian vacations too. Had she not done this, Paris would be no more, we would be speaking English, and it would be a little bit of a shame, because we have to have diversity. But nevertheless, we see that throughout history, and it is only more recently in the timeline of human events that we find mediums, the word mediums used. And we have many of them. We have Emanuel Swedenborg with his great exegesis, his great explanations of the New Testament, his mystical things, the Swedish man. We then move on to, of course, we talked about here today, we saw the beautiful movie about the Fox sisters here in Hydesville in upstate New York. We have, of course, William Crookes with his studies of the medium Florence Cook, who here in this picture materializes the spirit of Katie King, which was actually weighed and measured and studied by Crookes at length. And again, seeing that not only can the spirit world communicate, but it can do so in a tangible manner. And this was before Photoshop, people. So nowadays, we might have a very cynical world because we can probably explain technically everything away by saying it's just edited. But in that day, you had to draw really well. And that probably wouldn't be enough. But we also have, many of us know, other interesting, curious incidents of, for instance, the medium Nettie Colburn Maynard that was often called into the White House for seances with Mr. Abraham Lincoln. Or perhaps the medium Leonora Piper or Elizabeth Hope, also known as Madame d'Esperance. We also have the great Scottish flying medium, D.T. Home, a fantastic medium of physical effects, among other things, who once, in the presence of many learned people in the United Kingdom, levitated out of a window on the third floor, only to come in through another one on the other side. Miracle, really interesting, fantastic sounding effects that now we can understand through the study of mediumship and the fluids. But before we get there, we just want to make sure that there are many others that are not there, including, of course, St. Moses, Edgar Cayce, which we're familiar with, and more recently, our great Brazilian medium Francis Xavier, and to those of us, all of us who are here today, very lucky, our very own Divaldo Franco, who must be placed in the timeline of great mediums of all time. But if we are talking about mediumship, then let's talk about mediums. So what is a medium? Well, every individual who senses the influence of the spirits to any degree whatsoever, is a medium. If you can perceive, it's very logical, isn't it? Very simple at the end of the day. So simple, it's kind of frustrating, right? If you feel any influence from the spirits, whether you are aware or not, that's a very key point here, you are a medium. You are an intermediary between both planes. In fact, this faculty is inherent to all humankind. Everybody feels an influence of the spirits to a certain degree. And if that's the case, then it follows that everyone is a medium to a certain degree. The question is, to what degree? And who are you influenced by? I'll tell you a funny story, I hope you don't mind. Because it's really all about spiritual entourage. Right? If we are all sensitive to the spirits, then we also know that we are in tune with those that are like us. If you ever go to a party, you've seen this happen. This is an interesting phenomenon. There is a groups of people in different places. You'll probably find me hanging out close to the kitchen with my like-minded friends. Smokers might be in the balcony, right? Those who like music might be hanging out by the sound system, making sure things are happening. And so on and so on. It's the law of affinity. Likes attracts likes. So the question that comes to our minds once we understand that we all sense the influence of the Spirit to a certain way is, who are we hanging out with? That is to say, what is our spiritual influences? What is our spiritual entourage? And the first thing that we begin to think about when we learn about mediumship is, oh my God, I'm being followed all the time. Our mind is such an interesting thing, and we're such a level that we're so negative about things that we always think about the negative things. We're going to go into the positive things later. But I'll tell you a funny story. I live in Los Angeles, and which is, as you know, in the beautiful state of California, the most beautiful state in the country. After Florida. I learned that from him. But as I was driving down home. I live in West Hollywood, and I was driving back home from work at Santa Monica Boulevard. And there was a big traffic, and I didn't understand. And I just saw this like smoke coming out from, like, oh my God, a car broke down. I'm going forward, and all of a sudden I see this group of like 5 men, almost like a TV thing, like they come in a V, like formation, like one side the other. And there's all this other men around them with fire extinguishers on the floor, blowing to make some kind of smoke. And then I realized there's a lot of cameras going on. And so they're actually shooting a promo for a TV show, and it was actually for the TV show Entourage. So the funny thing about it is, here they are, this guy is walking with the smoke coming out, and they're really, cool and everything else. And then as I come by, I'm looking at that, and I must have been really interesting because one of the actors the whole thing was, the promo was shooting them down the street as they came in the middle of the cars and everything else. So as I was driving by, very slowly, and he gave me the finger pistols. He went. And he probably thought I was really into the whole thing. And I wasn't. I've never really even watched the show for you to have an idea. But the thought crossed my mind, which was, man, I wonder what his entourage is. Right? And I figured, do I have an entourage that I'm not seeing that's following me around like that all day long too? So it's always a very important question for us to ask is, who are we maintaining this law of affinity with? And by consequence, who is it that we are affecting? Because we also influence other people. We're always in the me mode, but we have to understand that whatever it is that we do affects other people as well. So who are we an entourage from? Do you want a better entourage? Then change the way you do things. Change the way you behave. And mediumship is perfectly apt to help us how to do that. But nevertheless, so when you go around and you start noticing negative thoughts and so forth, ask yourselves, who is my entourage? Why am I feeling this way? Should I be feeling this way? Is there a reason? More importantly, do I want to feel this way? Because regardless of whether the source is internal or external, we are in control, always. And that's something we forget quite often. That for every interaction to take place with the spiritual world, we must acquiesce. We must give permission, even if we are unaware. How do I know that? Well, let's keep going and I'll tell you. We also know that this ability is more or less pronounced in certain people because it really depends on their physical constitution. Like Divaldo was saying, there is obviously a physical thing with the nervous system that's more prone to receive the influences, and the pineal gland that we talked about as well. And we can look more into that into different sessions today and tomorrow. So every person has a different level of mediumship, which makes sense, follows what we said. And so mediumship, therefore, presents itself differently in different people. Right? Because we have different nervous systems, we have different bodies, we are different spirits. Thus, things will happen differently to different people. And then you ask, okay, but how do you know that? Well, funny thing is, I know that because of the Medium's book. The Medium's book, published in 1861, is a fantastic book. And the reason why it's so amazing is lots of research, so to say, went to it. It's not the product of Allan Kardec only, even though there's one name there. It's important for us to know that the questions and the materials that are in that book came to be in the book because they took place in many different places in Europe and throughout the world, were sent to Kardec. He compiled them together and matched them to see, using what he called the universal control of the spirits, by which he asserts in our beautiful The Spiritist magazine that for something to really be true, it must be shown in different places by different people. So he gets all these questions of this mediumistic experimentation people are having throughout Europe, throughout the known world. He brings all of them in, and he finds some patterns. He finds, these people over here are telling me that this is happening. Oh, look at that. These people over here are telling me the same thing. He finds an interesting question here. And then he asks other people, can you ask that over there? And these people don't know each other. So there's a fact-finding, there's a cross-checking that's happening, which makes the work robust and makes the work stand on its own, because it's not the fruit of just one intelligence. It is a collaboration in scientific terms of the likes we probably have never seen before, and maybe we'll never see after. So many different intelligence helped this book, both in the carnal world and in the spiritual world. And that is why we lend it so much credence. It's not the work of one person. With all due respect to everybody else that has books out there, the Medium's book has got to stand stronger because it is a result of multiple, maybe millions of hours of work by different people. And that's why we like so much. And the Medium's book, along with the Spirit's book, give us then the information from the spirits themselves saying, this is how it happens. And that is the great benefit that we get. But the really interesting part about the Medium's book that we often forget, because we live in times where mediumship is relatively easily accepted. We have mediums on TV. We can buy books from mediums. We are familiar with the word medium. We have TV shows about mediums. But if you think about it, before the Medium's book, and if you really go into it, mediums were something special and actually held power over other people. People would use their abilities as a medium to harness power, to extract people from other things, or to just bring fear into people. It was the realm of a few. But the Spirit's book, the Medium's book, it's the first treatise on mediumship ever written. It's the best study on mediumship there is. It's 153 years old, or the like, 52. But it holds up like there's no tomorrow, literally. So the interesting thing is that all of a sudden, mediumship, the knowledge about mediumship becomes democratic. Everybody can have it. It's no more the hold of a chosen few. Anybody can go out and read and learn about it and find out about it. And that's a fantastic transformation, people. Maybe we don't realize that, but he makes it plain to everybody, like everything that comes from God should be. For everybody, for everyone. And at the same time, he demystifies the mediums. The mediums are no longer special people that we should bow to, but human beings like you or I. In fact, they are, because we're all mediums. They have their own frailties and their own qualities, all striving to be better. So it all lends itself for us to understand that we must take an active role in the understanding of mediumship, because we're all in it together. It is a fantastic, as a matter of fact, tool for our own enlightenment. And if we think about it, it really is a tool for learning. Because with mediumship, we are able to learn from others. We are able to have examples from other people of their actions, of their behaviors in a past life, and then hear how they are after the fact. We see that, for instance, in the great book Heaven and Hell. The second part of Heaven and Hell, we have all these interesting stories about how a spirit communicating back into Kardec's time, saying, I was this kind of person on earth. I did this, and now this is how I feel. I did not used to care much about people's feelings, and now I feel my conscience striking at me because I'm hurt. Or I perform admirably, and I'm really happy to find people on the other side. So the interesting thing is that we learn from others. We are able to do that. And in the process of learning from others, we accelerate our learning, like Divaldo was saying. We now have the ability to understand and course correct halfway through it, right? Do you remember the time when there were no cell phones? And you used to, I know many of you don't remember, but let me remind you a little bit. It was an act of, like meeting somebody, it was an act of faith, right? You say, hey, you want to go to the movies? Yeah. What time? 8 o'clock. Where? At this movie theater. Okay. And then you got yourself in a car that day, or in a bus, or whatever it is. You went there, and you just hoped the person would show up. If something happened halfway through it, you're going to have to wait until all you get over there at the end, and then you have to kind of find a phone to call somebody, right? So it was a different world. So mediumship It's kind of our cell phones in a way, because now, if something happens along the way to the movies, you can call somebody and say, oh, let's change plans, let's do something else. Or, no, this is a great movie, I am guaranteeing I'm going. It gives us that certainty, accelerate our learning. But it's a constant process that needs to be done. The study of mediumship, it's really the greatest gift we can have, because it's a process for us to do this again, right? The washer and, dryer cycle. Wash, rinse, repeat. We've got to do that all the time. So you got to keep checking for our knowledge. In fact, I kind of call it our spiritual GPS. And as GPSs go, I'm sure you had this experience, but I have a friend who has a really interesting relationship with a GPS. We go together to places, and he's a fantastic guy, and I really enjoy being with him. But GPS and him don't work. Judith and him don't work, because I always name the GPS, because there's always a voice, and they're so polite, right? Turn left. Thank you, Judith. But a certain day, going from Boston, I think we were going to Maryland. It was a long drive, and the GPS was, in about a half a mile, turn right. Okay. In 200 feet, turn right. And it's like, no, this is wrong. It's obviously wrong. She doesn't know anything. I'm like, it's Judith. Judith always gives you the directions. Like, follow Judith. No, she doesn't know it. And she goes the other way around, right? So my question is, having had the GPS and having set the GPS, why not use it? Right? It's a mystery, the mystery of faith. But the point here is, a GPS is only as good as you use it. Whereas mediumship helps us get our bearings, we must ask ourselves, what destination am I going to? Am I making use of it? Will I follow the directions? And like a GPS, it is okay when we make mistakes. You know why? Because we're able to recalculate. Right? When we make mistakes, the knowledge that we are able to garnish from mediumship, the moral knowledge that we are after, allows us to change the route that we are going to so that we can go back and reach our destination. And there will be detours, but Judith can get you there. I joke, surely, but you get the idea? It's really not that different. It is a great tool that allows us to go into places. And if before we were really afraid of going out because we didn't know where to go, because we didn't know how to get there, and we have to unfold maps, today we have a much easier and better life because we can leave house, and without even, when we start our cars, we don't even know where the address is, and we're putting it in and going without fear and moving forward. And that is a fantastic message that we have for ourselves too, which is, what is our spiritual GPS? What destination are we putting in there? And are we going to listen to the directions? Are we going to take the route? It's an important call. But spiritual GPSs aside, the fundamental thing about mediumship is that it allows us to harness those moral implications of things. In the beginning, we saw great phenomena with the turning tables, with all kinds of different things. And they were really useful, and they really had their purpose, because they validated the phenomena for us, and they surely did get our attention, didn't they? However, after a while, you must ask yourselves, how many tables do I need to see levitate? How many different materialization effects must I see to really change the way I behave? You see, most people want to be entertained. They want to see different things and then they go home, just like watching TV. We need to go to a step further and graduate from physical effects to intellectual effects. If a table is moving, who is behind that? Is it a spirit? If it's a spirit, does it mean then that I'm a spirit too? When my body passes, will I be there as well? Ooh, if that's the case, then does it mean then I'm going to see other people? Should I be nicer to them then? Because I'm still going to deal with them. Right? Should I change the way we act? Should I really reconsider the way I go about my life? These are all beautiful questions that we must ask ourselves, and this is one of the reasons why we, as Spiritists as a whole, no longer pay as much attention to physical effects, because we've had the proof that the spirits are there. The medium effects have served their reason. Now we're embarking on a more beautiful journey of self-discovery and self-awareness, which has to be done with our own minds. We cannot control everybody else or anything else, but barely control ourselves. So that's what we focus on. And as we do that, we also see the mediumship then shifts. It's this mental shift that takes place in our mind where we stop worrying about, give me proof that you're there. Are you really there? You already know. You've seen through other people's experiences. Our loved ones passed. They're okay. So now we begin to feel really interesting of how do things work? And ultimately, it leads us to the conclusion that really we are no longer physical beings. We are spiritual beings who happen to have a body. Like C. Lewis used to say. We're not bodies that have a spirit. We're spirits that have a body. So, do I live my life in that perspective? As the spirits tell us? Am I listening to this great, beautiful GPS that's been giving me? And as we think about those things, we go back to our primary topics and understanding that mediumship is everywhere, really. And it's always present, and it has always been, and it would always be. And as we become more attuned with ourselves, with our own feelings, the new era that's upon us will only allow us to be even more sensitive. So there will be more effects. There will be greater spiritual communication. So we might as well get ahead of it and understand things. And the way we do that is by studying it. There's no other way. You can set the GPS. You can have a GPS. You can have the best, nicest money GPS can buy. Or GPS money can buy, I mean. But if you don't use it, if you don't set it, if you don't follow it, you're still lost. So what is it that we need to do to follow all the abundant directions and love and messages that we are be giving every day? It's a simple process. It's one turn at a time. But most importantly, it really is about the proof of God's love for us. Think about it. Mediumship is this great, great tool that lets us know that the intelligence of those who have lived before us is still there. That means that we too will never end. That who we are and what we want to be remain always a possibility and alive. That no matter what circumstance, we will remain after this body has gone. And that ought to bring us great joy. Because it also means that everybody around us will also remain after they're gone. So the bonds of love that we have and that we build today are forever. The people who you love today, that we love today, that I love today, will be there forever, and so will our loves for them. And in fact, as we come back life after life and grow our circle of love, there will be more people who love us. And there's also means that there have been people that we don't recall, but they are there right now in this moment, loving us, cheering us, supporting us. And that is the positive side of that mediumship brings that we often forget because we're so trapped in the negative and the negative influence of spirits. How about the positive influence of spirits? How about the blatant proof that's right in front of us that love is absolutely all around us? That those that we love and who love us are there. That is why Jesus recommended that for us to go while we're still on our way and reconcile ourselves to our enemies. Because if we don't, they too will be there, and we're just postponing the problem. Let's solve it today. Let's feel the joy that it is to enlarge our circle of friends. Abraham Lincoln has a fantastic sentence. He says, "Do I not destroy my enemies by making them my friends?" That is what we must do. And mediumship shows us that. It shows us that we live on. Those that we love live on. That we're always going to move forward. And there are those that are much wiser to us that are giving us evidence of life to come, how to behave, and are urging us to take their heed, to change the way we behave so that we can become happier. It gives us the possibility for us to course correct why we're driving in life. Isn't that fantastic? Wouldn't you rather fix something that's not working now rather than get to the end and have to redo it? Mediumship allows us to do that. And that is a fantastic proof of love. Because only a creator that is kind, that is loving, and has our best interest in heart would create a system in which we can get constant feedback and constant wisdom from people that have gone before us and that have known how to navigate the difficult trials of life so that we can be happy. Now, it isn't easy. But as Thomas Paine said in his a great foundational piece, that which we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly. Everything that's easy, we don't pay attention to. We have to put skin in the game, right? So that's what mediumship calls us. So the great message that we have today is for you not to forget that it is everywhere and is always present, which means you're constantly under the influence of spirit. So much so, the Spirit's book tells us, that oftentimes it is they who guide you. And if that's the case, who is guiding us? Let's be reflective of ourselves so that we can then better leverage this tool called mediumship to get in touch with who we are and understand what is external and what is internal. Regardless of what kind of external influence we're receiving, there is only one thing that we can do, and it change our internal selves. That's what we work on. And once we do that, let us never, not even for a minute, not even for a second, forget that God loves us so much that He has placed thousands of souls who care about us, who love us, out there in this minute, sending us their best so that we can do our best, so that we can be reminded that when we too part, we will join them again, because we are joined right now, and realize that life is but one. And once we do that, we expand our horizons and we realize that all the trials and tribulations of our everyday life are sure to be very meaningless in retrospect. That rerouting that we did in the GPS, when we get there, that's gone. So let's focus on what's ahead and let's use mediumship as exemplified by Christ, our greatest teacher, to help ourselves, to help others, and to ultimately become happier, because that's what we want, and that's what God wants for us. And as Paul the Apostle said, when God is for us, who can be against us? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Assisi. Francis? No, Daniel. We were going to have a short break, but unfortunately we're running a little bit behind and we're going to go straight to Q&A questions. I'd like to invite Mr. Divaldo Franco to come up here, please. And for those of you, if you can hurriedly make your questions for Daniel Assisi, that would be great, and just bring them up to us, please. We have about 20 minutes. Thank you.
So I think a few questions have already been submitted to Divaldo, and so we're going to ask Divaldo to answer them, and if you have questions for Daniel, you can bring them to us here. Então, Divaldo, fica à vontade para responder, viu? As perguntas como você quiser, tá ok?
Por que nos fenômenos de antigamente não mais acontecem? Como aconteciam em Antioquia, na época de Paulo de Tarso, vozes diretas, etc. Os fenômenos continuam acontecendo. Somente que a divulgação já não produz o mesmo impacto daqueles tempos apostólicos. Em toda parte, os espíritos continuam comunicando-se. E as materializações, as práticas de cura física, emocional e psíquica, e também as revelações. Até há pouco, enquanto Chico Xavier estava encarnado, as comunicações eram públicas. Ele psicografava de 8 a 10 mensagens notáveis, provando a imortalidade da alma. Faz muitos anos, eu tive uma problemática de garganta muito séria, e estando com ele, fui convidado para orarmos pela madrugada. E o espírito Sheila materializou-se. Aplicou-me radioatividade. E porque eu fiquei muito emocionado, disse-lhe, quando passar este momento, eu vou ter a impressão que foi uma alucinação. Eu gostaria que a irmã me desse algo material para ficar. Ela então me deu um pedaço do tecido da capa de enfermagem da Segunda Guerra Mundial. Eu rasguei, guardei até hoje. Ela me trouxe flores Edelweiss e violetas dos Alpes, que eu tenho até hoje. Então os fenômenos acontecem. Naquela época, eles foram registrados e divulgados. Hoje se tornaram tão naturais que já não se faz a divulgação com aquele mesmo caráter. Mas em nossas reuniões mediúnicas, esses fenômenos acontecem ainda mais fascinantes. Chegam espíritos obsessores, adversários perversos, são doutrinados e os doentes ficam bons, sem estarem presentes, sem saberem de nada. Portanto, os fenômenos continuam.
In such a developed scientific society, why haven't we found a uncontestable proof of mediumship? This is when I want to plug session number 2 tomorrow, when we talk about scientific proofs of mediumship by yours truly. Selfless plug there. But the question here, I guess, really is, what is uncontestable? What does that mean? In our society today, it's really a good question. Some people, no judgment on our part, still do not believe the man has landed on the moon. Others still have trouble navigating the concept of evolution. So, ultimately, it is up to us, and it always will be, to make our own mind about the world around us. And it has to be that way, because it is our responsibility to find out how things work and how do we behave. And we cannot transfer that responsibility into somebody else. And ultimately, to be honest, oftentimes that's what we want. We want other people to say, no, this is what it is. Because it exonerates us from having to do the work, from having to battle and grapple with the idea and truly learn. So, will there ever be uncontestable proof of mediumship? It depends. It depends on the person. For me, there is already uncontestable proof of mediumship. For you, it's up to you to decide.
Quais são os desafios e métodos adequados para manter o equilíbrio mental, emocional e espiritual, sendo médium e trabalhando em ambiente psiquiátrico? Hoje a Terra é um ambiente psiquiátrico. Há até uma anedota muito interessante de um paciente que foi visitar um hospital psiquiátrico e colocaram um doente melhorado para ir explicando. E a visita, muito curiosa, perguntava quem é este, quem é aquele, e o doente ia dizendo. Quando chegou no fim, à saída, a visita perguntou ao doente, mas quer dizer que todos aqui são loucos? E disse, não, aqui está a chefia, os loucos estão lá fora. A conduta é a mesma. Estejamos num ambiente saudável, num ambiente vulgar, num ambiente de portadores de transtornos psiquiátricos. É a paz interior. Quando nós acendemos a lâmpada interna dos bons hábitos, do equilíbrio e da oração, seja onde for que estivermos, estaremos sempre bem. Os espíritos do mal somente nos atacam nas nossas debilidades. Muitas vezes, em viagem, as pessoas me dizem: olha, estamos num ambiente muito preparado. Estivemos lá, oramos para facilitar o ambiente. Eu agradeço, sensibilizado. Mas o ambiente nós temos que levar. Porque se a pessoa não estiver bem, o ambiente pode estar excelente. Ele não tem tempo de impregnar-se. Eu já tive a ocasião de falar em ambientes torpes, antigos cassinos, cabarés, porque eram os únicos auditórios grandes da cidade. E num desses, eu tive um encontro com uma jovem equivocada, que foi um dos mais belos da minha vida, porque ela havia sido proibida de ir, porque era um lugar alegre depois da meia-noite, mas o prefeito requisitou para a conferência, por ser a sala maior numa cidade do interior de São Paulo. Porque ela era muito bonita, o soldado deixou que ela passasse. E eu havia narrado a história de Maria de Madalena. Quando terminei, ela entrou na fila e veio agradecer. E me disse, muito jovem: eu sou Maria de Madalena. Eu disse: não, minha filha, você está, no momento, exercendo a função de Maria de Madalena, mas está porque quer. Eu disse: não, mas eu não sei fazer outra coisa. Então, se a gente não sabe, aprende. É muito fácil de aprender. Falei-lhe sobre Jesus, a esperança, abracei eternamente. Ela me agradeceu muito. 10 anos depois, eu voltei à mesma cidade. Agora era um auditório maior, a cidade havia progredido, e veio falar comigo uma senhora muito bonita, com um cavalheiro de idade. Então ela me perguntou a terrível questão: lembra de mim? Porque viajando pelo mundo inteiro, e um contato nem sempre dá. Mas eu tenho a memória auditiva e me lembrei dela pela voz. Então eu digo: me lembro. Só que está mais bonita, está mais gordinha. Estou casada. Aqui está meu marido. O marido era um senhor, digamos, 20 anos mais velho. Eu parabenizei. E ela me disse: gostaria que eu fosse tomar café comigo amanhã pela manhã. Eu expliquei que não podia, estava de passagem, ia para outras cidades. Mas o senhor não vai ter que tomar café de manhã? Eu digo: vou sim. Antecipe uma hora e vá lá em casa. Então eu perguntei ao meu anfitrião, ele concordou. E no dia seguinte eu fui à casa dela. Era uma linda mansão, uma casa de fazenda do interior. E ela estava à porta, com 8 crianças, uma no colo, e o cavalheiro ao lado. Quando eu cheguei, ela disse: quero que o senhor conheça a minha família. Eu fiquei muito emocionado. Ela perguntou: o senhor lembra mesmo de mim? Eu digo: lembro. Do que eu era? Eu digo: não, do que você experimentou. Porque nós nunca somos, nós passamos. Pois é, depois daquela palestra eu não voltei mais ao bordel. Fui trabalhar como empregada doméstica e me prometi que nunca mais ia vender o meu corpo. E esse cavalheiro era meu cliente das quartas-feiras. Então, quando ele soube que eu havia mudado de vida, ele me procurou. Foi me procurar e queria continuar. Eu digo: não, agora eu sou outra. Estou trabalhando com dignidade para viver. E ele ficou impressionado, perguntou se eu queria namorar com ele. Namorar nos tempos antigos, porque namorar hoje é terminar o encontro. Então eu disse: quero namorar a antiga. Por fim, 2 semanas depois, ele perguntou: quer casar-se comigo? Eu disse: não sei se você quer casar-se comigo, eu sou uma mulher equivocada. Ele disse: não, você é uma mulher honrada. Você vendia o corpo, mas não vendia a alma, você era virgem. Então combinamos e casamos. Ele era muito rico, eu não sabia. 1 ano depois ele disse: eu quero ter um filho. E ele disse: não posso ter filho. Quando eu fui trabalhar no bordel, eu fiz uma cirurgia para não perder tempo com criança. Ele disse: mas eu quero ter um filho. Ele disse: mas eu não lhe posso dar o filho. Eu não quero ter um filho meu, eu quero adotar um filho. E então, cada ano, em homenagem àquela conferência, nós adotamos um filho. Tem 10 anos, aqui estão os 8 filhos. E o último chegado chama-se Divaldo. Então, hoje ela já é avó, é médium trabalhando no bem. Ela estava naquele ambiente, mas não era daquele ambiente. A sua alma era pura, mas era uma alma ignorante. Então nós poderemos estar muito bem quando temos vida interior. O que eu recomendo a qualquer pessoa e aos médiuns, tenham a vida interior muito ativa. Não se perturbe com as coisas de fora. Se você acender uma lâmpada dentro, você brilha. Não importa essa luz, porque esta clareia, mas projeta sombra. Se a lâmpada é interna, ela terá sempre luz. Portanto, mantenha o equilíbrio emocional, atenda os pacientes, mas não se envolva emocionalmente. Cada paciente tem a sua cruz, a cruz é dele. Jesus aceitou a ajuda do sirineu, mas não transferiu a cruz. O doente sempre quer transferir o problema para nós. E nós, na nossa ingenuidade, queremos resolver os problemas dos outros. É um erro. Primeiro resolva seu problema e ajude os outros a resolverem os seus. O mandamento é amar a Deus acima de todas as coisas e ao próximo como a si mesmo. Tem que se amar para depois amar o próximo.
Here's another one. How do I know if the information given by a spirit is the truth? Well, there's a reason why we showed the Medium's book over there. There's actually a great chapter in the Medium's book. It's in the high 20s. I can't remember the number right now. I don't know if it's 25 or 28, but there's an entire chapter dedicated to analyzing the content of the communication. And there are many factors that Kardec brings to us, like the language, the tone of the language, who did it come from, for us to think about what the message actually says. So there are many different things, and we urge you to read a little bit of that chapter of the Medium's book, because what often happens is a very curious phenomenon, which is we get a message. If there is a name of a spirit in the bottom, for some reason we automatically give it credence, a lot of it. And it could have been just me back there, just writing Pereira de Menezes in the bottom of it. So it's up to us, to us to really look at the communication and understand whether it's really the right tone. Does it sound like really good advice? And who did it come from? Is it a reputable person, a reputable source? There's all these different considerations that we must take into account before we render judgment on whether we think it's good or not. But nevertheless, again, it's one of those instances that we were talking about where we are so desirous of transferring the responsibility and just doing something from somebody else telling us because they will solve our problems. But even when we get that information from other people, it's important for us to analyze it ourselves, because ultimately, if we are going to act on it, then it's our responsibility, no matter who told us to do what. So it's always really a great advice to read the Medium's book, not only read but study. I know it can be a very daunting task, and sometimes it's a dry book because it's there's so much information in it. That's why we advise to always do it in a group. It's a fantastic thing to do. Talk to people. Do a little bit at a time. Read it, reread it, really think about it. Role play with it. Get real cases and analyze. Because that information, that skill would not only serve us to interpret spirit messages, but would also interpret everyday messages. Because after all, spirits are just us without a body. So it will help us also understand how to interpret communications from other people. So when somebody that's incarnate as well and give us advice, how do I know it's good advice? It's also applicable. We always transfer our personal our experience to the discarnate world, but it's good for us to see that what works there also works here. So it also works for our relationships, for our friends, for our jobs, for our work, knowing how to filter information. Does it tells us to do good things? Does it come from a reputable source? How is it expressed? Is it kindly? Is there any kind of ulterior motive? Would anybody benefit from sending me astray? They're all different kinds of questions, but ultimately, it's for every one of us to do that. But fortunately, we have this great guide, the Medium's book, which we hope you'll pick up every once in a while. Just a beautiful table. I always say this, people think it's funny, but it's really not. My favorite part of all Kardec's books are the table of contents. In every single book. You open the table of contents and it's just light. Because the way things were structured, the way that things came about, it's fantastic. You want to find something quickly? Table of contents is your friends.
Como alejar? Como alejar un espíritu mal de una persona? Orando por el espíritu. El espíritu desencarnado es la víctima. Este que le sufre en este momento la persecución es el antiguo verdugo, algoz, que necesita de ayudar a su víctima a recuperarse. Se nosotros deseamos ayudar a alguien obsesado, es necesario envolver al espíritu obsesor en simpatía y no solamente al obsesado, porque el obsesado es el deudor, y trabajar para que el obsesado haga su parte, porque mismo que el espíritu malo se resuelva por abandonarle, si él permanece con sus vicios, con sus malas inclinaciones, atrae otros. Es indispensable la transformación moral para mejor del paciente. Por lo tanto, nuestra preocupación básica es atender al vengador y a la víctima para que se transforme para mejor. Como dijo Jesús, por mucho amar, las equivocaciones son perdonadas.
So here's a good one. They're all good. Some are gooder than others. How can we know when we are contacting other spirits and when we are tapping into some kind of subconscious memory? Good questions, really good questions. I guess what we were talking about before and how to analyze a message, be it written, vocal, whatever it may be, applies here as well. The same filters, the same knowledge. Again, these are skills, transferable skills that we learn from Kardec, with the Medium's book, and we can apply in all different ways. However, the assumption here is always that our subconscious memory messages are bad, right? So we are always concerned about, I want to make sure that I am not filtering this out, that I'm really being faithful to the spirit message, which is great. But it is quite normal in the beginning of mediumship for our subconscious to emerge itself a little bit as well. Because it's there, it's subconscious. And it needs to be addressed. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is not necessarily the best thing if it prolongs itself intermittently. But nevertheless, we need to address those questions, those messages, those things that are coming up. So let's not be afraid too much that it's going to happen in the beginning, because in the beginning, we read Kardec and we learn that if we are in a spectrum, it's going to be more towards our subconscious in the beginning, and then later it starts shifting more through practice to the spirit messages. So first we must practice, and we obviously must study. And when we study, why don't we do that? Why not do that in a group? That is the reason we do it together. Because there's great strength and value in sitting down with people you trust, you respect, and you study with, because that's the people you engage in a study with, right? A long study. And then you really talk about this and see if it finds credence. But ultimately, a sage in antiquity has already told you, know thyself. You have to search for knowledge inside of you to know yourself, to see, will this come from me? Will this serve from me? Does it make sense? And there's always a little bit of doubt in the beginning, and we're going to be able to tell them apart with time, but it's a process. It's not a product, right? We don't just sit and it happens. It takes practice. It takes bettering. It takes perfecting. It takes studying. So don't give up. Talk to people. Study. And with time, you're going to be able to not only rely on your own feelings, but also those of the people that are working with you and their experiences, so that you can be assured whether it's yours or somebody else's.
Temos aqui uma pergunta em inglês. Eu vou lê-la, mas se vocês não entenderem, é porque meu acento é de Cambridge. Why did you say we have a God chain? Uau! Não fui eu quem disse. Foi o Dr. Jim Hammer, o geneticista, no livro que se chama O Gene de Deus. Dos 35 mil, ele selecionou um, ao qual ele deu o nome VMAT2. Esse VMAT2 é o gene de Deus. E por que ele classificou? Porque todos automaticamente cremos na divindade. A descrença vem pela convivência social, pela educação, e a religião vem por causa do nosso convívio. Então ele cita vários exemplos. Se pegarmos dois gêmeos, levarmos um para o extremo oriente e o outro para o extremo ocidente, o do extremo oriente, se for viver com uma família materialista, torna-se materialista. O outro, se viver numa família indiferente, ele crê em Deus automaticamente. As experiências do Dr. Jim Hammer tornaram-se um ponto positivo para confirmar a presença de Deus. Então vale a pena ler o livro, chama-se O Gene de Deus, o God Chain. E o nome dele é Jim, D-E-A-N, Hammer, H-A-M-E-R.
Muito obrigado, Divaldo. Muito obrigado, Daniel, pela excelente sessão de perguntas e respostas. E temos agora, então, que fazer um break. So I'm going to switch to English. Thank you very much, Divaldo. Thank you very much, Daniel. We'll